and I had another idea of how it is that we could do this based off of squares, and how we could essentially use things like security cameras and stuff like that to ensure that these locations are secure, and they have some sort of a centralized security that is like almost like the building or whatever's personal protective service or something like that. And in this way, we wouldn't have to worry about things like mass shootings and stuff like that. We wouldn't have to worry about things like acts of terrorism, because all of this stuff would be under strict surveillance and stuff like that, based off of the way that these security cameras would be set up, and how, with the exception of people's private homes and stuff like that, the locations that people lived in would be extremely safe. They would be extremely well watched and guarded. So now I want you to imagine for a moment a city that is based on the type of technology I just described, based on the layout I just described, based on the levels of efficiency that I just relayed. And I want you to imagine that that city is also a self-governing city based off of a 3-branch system of government with checks and balances. And the cities themselves are small enough to where each and every community actually has some sort of or each and every citizen in the community actually has some sort of a role to play in that community, in that governmental structure. And because the numbers of the amount of people in these cities are small, it's almost like, how it is in a small town. Everybody knows each other. The whole idea here is that each of these small communities of, say, at the most 25,000 people or whatever, would end up being self-sufficient, energy efficient, having their own laws based off of the way that they want to live life. And if they wanted to, say, go and start their city somewhere else with different laws and, different way of doing things, then they could easily do that. So we're talking about the use of a winning socioeconomic system, and then combining that winning socioeconomic system with a winning geopolitical system, like, say, the constitutional republic that we have in the United States, and the 3-branch checks and balances form of government that we have here in the US. So we take what works in the geopolitical sense, and we use that symbiotically with what works best in the socioeconomic sense. And in the process, if we take into account fractal math, if we take into account the structure of the universe and of the Earth itself, if we take into account things like electromagnetism and stuff like that, inertia, propulsion, 0-point energy, then we can really begin to stabilize our economy in multiple different ways, through stabilizing our grid system, through stabilizing the amount of energy that we get, and the fact that we don't have to get it from a foreign source. We don't have to extract it from the ecosystem, say through oil or fracking or natural gas or whatever, that it's always something there, that it's an infinite energy supply that is always supplying more than you're always supplying more than you're taking. We're talking about levels of efficiency on multiple different levels, and using these things in symbiotic conjunction with one another to move our whole society forward, as opposed to allowing these individual parts that are working together inefficiently to make profit for less than 1% of the population to rule our lives. And this is the final ingredient to this step here, and that is having a gold-backed or silver-backed currency. And in the process of having a gold or silver-backed currency in conjunction with a socioeconomic system that is much more stable and far smaller numbers, we would actually have some sort of an economic stability that would be long-lasting in the United States. And instead of all the economic prosperity that would be happening in the United States going and feeding those that own the Federal Reserve, instead, through this gold-backed currency, through this stabilized socioeconomic grid system, through this new through this applied geopolitical system of freedom and liberty and stuff like that, we could really create a society that has been unrivaled, that is unlike anything that anybody has ever seen on this planet. I'm not going to say before, because it's been here before. We're just going to be getting back in tune with what was millions of years ago. Some people, well, we haven't been around for millions of years. Oh, yes, we have. There's human footprints next to dinosaur footprints. Don't even give me that. So yes, we have the technology, we have the capability, we have the opportunity to evolve as individuals and as a society, as spiritual independent beings, and as spiritually interdependent beings with one another and with the earth itself and all of its life forms. And if we understand that we can essentially use life forms, we can use things like insects, or use things like fungi, or use things like wolves and stuff like that to stabilize ecosystems that surround these thriving metropolises, these thriving systems, then we can really start to understand how it is that human civilization would have a symbiotic relationship with nature, and how that would create abundance. Because if the ecosystems are stable, that's how abundance is created. And eventually, I theorize that we would start living hunter and gatherer type societies, where individuals that lived in these cities, whether they be squares or circles or stars of David or whatever, individuals that lived in these cities would be going out into the natural world and either hunting or gathering their food, because there would be an abundance of food to hunt and gather. And so there wouldn't necessarily be this need to go to the store and stuff like that, because the store itself would be all around you. Especially when we get into the way that we can help these ecosystems to thrive through the controlling of the weather. I hope you're beginning to see what it is that I'm saying here, because this is the next step. This is the next level. This is the Jedi way of living in society. This is the Jedi way of creating socioeconomic, geopolitical, and financial systems. And because it's a fractal, because it's all a fractal, all you have to do is create energy independence and stability, economic independence and stability, grid independence and stability on the smallest level, that is the American citizen, the home, and then build out from there, and the society will essentially clean itself up from that point on.
So, I certainly hope you enjoyed that video. I certainly hope I relayed the information in a way that was understandable. I certainly hope that this is something that we can all work together to achieve. I know that it is something we can all work together to achieve if we can all come to the same conclusions based off of the same core values. And that is that we need to be thinking about 7 generations ahead. We need to think to ourselves, how is this decision that I'm making right now going to affect 7 generations ahead? Not just of our own children, but of the planet itself, of the life forms of the planet itself. And if we ask ourselves that question, and then we ask ourselves, how is it that what it is that we're doing now is going to affect 7 generations ahead, we realize there won't be a 7th generation. However, if we implement many or all of the ideas that I have just relayed, then we ask ourselves, well, how will this choice affect 7 generations from now? The answer is it would create abundance, it would create peace, it would create prosperity, it would create economic and geopolitical stability. It would allow for self-governance. It would allow for economic freedom, allow for economic surplus, and not at the expense of the environment, not at the expense of life forms of the planet or of each other, but rather by having a positive and symbiotic relationship with all of these things. And this is how our society can and will prosper. It's actually the only way that it can and will prosper. And those decisions, that model will positively affect the 7th generation in ways that we, in all honesty, probably cannot even think about right now, because once we implement this idea, and once we get in harmony with the ecosystem, once we get in harmony with the flow of energy in the universe and the multiverse, then we can really start to evolve in a whole new way. And the children that are going to be born within this new type of society are going to be on a whole other level of advanced. So that's actually going to be the thing that I talk about in the next couple of videos, is how it is that we can, say, transform our education system, how we can transform our foster care system, how we can transform our energy system, our energy supplies, how we can transform pretty much many of the inefficient aspects to our society here in the United States and abroad, and how we can do so where we don't necessarily throw the old system away and just try to start new, but rather where we look at the old system and say, okay, how can we use this old system to help symbiotically create this new system, having the old system fall away, whether it be petro use or the petrodollar, and how we can use the petrodollar, how we can use petroleum and stuff like that to create a society that is petroleum independent, that is not petroleum debt-based currency dependent, that we can use a gold-backed currency, that we can use a zero-point energy system. As we begin to taper away from these other highly destructive and enslaving socioeconomic and geopolitical forms of civilization. So I certainly hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy the ones to come, because, like I said, we're going to be diving in deep on how it is that we can transform pretty much most of the inefficient, if not all of the inefficient aspects to our society, and how we can like upgrade to a higher level of efficiency and function. So I'm Admiral Angley. Remember, knowledge always overcomes power. Thank you for your time. Good to be back, baby.